Morning.
Morning, Prof.
Morning, Prof.
Morning, Prof.
Okay, loud and clear. All right. So, did I discuss with you your assignment last week?
Yeah.
I thought so. Yeah, just in case. Yeah. Your group assignment, I'm saying. Yeah. All right. The other thing is before I start the lecture proper is your midterm assessment. I was just thinking maybe we can split it into two. One portion would be something like a quiz, which we can conduct online during the class session or at certain specified time. Maybe some, short answer question or even objective questions for the first part. The second, maybe one or two essay question, which will be a take-home kind of format. So I have not decided yet, but this is just my thinking at this point of time ataupun plan lah more or less ya, plan saya untuk semester ini. And then, so is for the midterm assessment. And then you will have your, of course, your group assignment, which is about 30%. But that 30% is split into two portions or two components rather. The first one is your written assignment, which is 20% of the 30. And then 10% will be for your presentation. Yeah. So total for group assignment is 30%. And then the last assessment will be your final exam, which is likely to be a take-home exam. Maybe for a period of 24 hours. Yeah, for you to complete the exam. So that is my plan. So this is already the third week. So I'm thinking maybe by the 6th week or the 7th week, we probably have one midterm assessment later on. Okay, itu untuk perencanaan kita untuk semester ini ya. Alright. So before I start again, is there any questions or anything you want to tell me or you want to let the others know about it? Other than the COVID-19 cases? Okay, if not, then I will proceed, yeah? I will share with you my notes. I have exactly more or less revised my note, edited. So this is the latest as of yesterday. The notes that I prepared for the class discussion today or presentation today. Yeah. So the topic is on cari nota dulu. Okay. Yeah. So the topic is on demographic perspective. So basically, can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. So the demographic perspective is really looking at how people in the past have looked at the issue of demography or population and what they have written as well. Plus, of course, some of the demographic theory, in other words, the population theories. Yeah, so that is what we will look at for this session today. Yeah. Um, okay, so what we will do is we will go through the perspective from the pre-modern population doctrines, um, and then the prelude to Malthus, that is before the Malthusian theory or perspective came about. There were also a few thinkers, or rather people who had written something about population and its impact. Yeah, and then we will look at the Malthusian theory or perspective, and then after that will be the Marxist or Marxian perspective that based on Karl Marx apa namanya, perspective or theories of population growth. Yeah? And after that will be the prelude, or before we look at the demographic transition theory, which we have seen last week actually, yeah, when we were looking at the demographic trends. We actually have more or less looked at the issue of demographic transition, but this prelude is the what happened before that. And then will be the theory of demographic transition, yeah, and then so after that we will be looking at the demographic transition, whether it is really a set of transitions or not. Yeah, right. So that's is the order of the um, presentation or discussion for today. Yeah, right. So I start with putting up a map here. Again, last week also there was a similar map which I put up just to show on the distribution of world population, and also the density. Yeah, so you could see from here that most of the populations of the world are around the Asian region, particularly in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and China, of course. Yeah, on the eastern part of Asian region, termasuk juga Asian kawasan-kawasan di Indonesia, Philippines, and all that. Then the other concentration is in Europe or European countries, the Eastern European countries. Some parts of Africa, for example, in Nigeria, and also patches here and there. And then in the United States or in North America, as well as other countries as well. All right. So this is more or less um, um, giving you a picture of where populations are located, world population, I would say, located throughout the world. Okay. All right. So with regard to the perspective on the population or demographic perspective, there are two key questions or pertinent questions that were more or less the key to how people look at population and its consequences and all that. Yeah? So the first one is what causes population to grow, yeah, or change, right? What are the possibilities? What are the factors and all that? The other is the consequences of growth, or population growth or change. So these are questions that more or less have been addressed by the demographers or people who come up with their perspective on population in the past and also even today. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at some of the demographic perspective from the old days until modern time. Yeah. Now, the earliest, for example, the earliest recorded perspective was around 1300 BC. This is based on Genesis punya perspective. Dia punya perspective is for human being to be fruitful and multiply. In other words, encourage people to have families, to have children, yeah, and growth in the population. But you must remember, of course, during this time, the number of people on Earth, the dunia ni, was very few actually, yeah, but not many people around, right? Not even apa namanya, million, yeah, during that time. And then following that, about 500 BC or BCE, is during Confucius time, where it was believed that the government should play a role, yeah, government ataupun yang pemerintah should play a role in terms of maintaining the balance between population growth and the resources available in the particular location or country. Right, so there was already a concern on how much resources are available and how many people can live and survive on those resources. Yeah? So there is a need for government to maintain that kind of balance. So that's the start of a more or less a policy actually, yeah, where government try to come up with some kind of policy to make sure that the populations do not outgrow the resources that they have. Right, so that's 500 BC, and then about this is this is just estimate. It's not exactly at about 360 BC. Plato, I think most of you know who Plato is, scholar. Plato, according to Plato, it's not just the number of people in the country or in the world that matters, but actually the quality of the population, yeah, is more important according to him. So that's where talk about the role of education, the role of knowledge, and so on, yeah? And skills as well, right? So while quantity is good, but the quality of people of the population is even more important. Okay, so perspective based on the quality of population. Then in about 340 BC, another famous individual by the name of Aristotle. Aristotle, I think, is a Greek person, individual, and he believed that population should be limited, right? So, in other words, there must be a control, yeah, in terms of the size of population, right? So, there was already an increase in the population of the world by then. So, and then his concern was we should, to some extent, control, yeah, the growth in the population, and he believed that abortion, yeah, abortion for the first time in history, he believed that abortion might be appropriate way to control population growth, yeah. So to the views from Aristotle, about 340 BC. All right, another go on there, about 100 BC. Another famous person also by the name of Cicero, right? Belief ataupun dia punya perspektif is that the growth in the population is necessary. Ya, perlu ada pertumbuhan populasi because he was looking at the situation during the Roman Empire. Roman Empire, you know, is quite a big empire in Europe at that time, where the Roman Empire expand its boundaries beyond Italy, yeah, beyond Rome. Okay, so in order to have that strength, yeah, to maintain that empire, you need people. Okay, so population growth according to Cicero. Again, the context, we have to understand the context, yeah, at that time, that they need a lot of people, particularly men, yeah, able-bodied men who can help to you know, promote or expand the Roman Empire during that time. Right, so population growth necessary according to Cicero. And then so after a number of years, of course, roughly around 400 AD, yeah, 400 AD, a man by the name of Saint Augustine, that's the name of the person, of course. Now, by this time, the population of the world has increased, of course, yeah. So he was concerned about the growth as well, yeah, and the growth of the population, and also how to control, yeah, and also the consequences of population growth, particularly in terms of birth, yeah, fertility. So he came out with what is his opinion, more or less, yeah, his belief that abstinence is preferred way to deal with sexuality. In other words, apa namanya, abstinence ini kalau dalam bahasa Malaysia maksudnya apa namanya, hold on, it's a period more or less of absence in a way, yeah, where, for example, can be a few months, it can be a year or so, yeah, where you try to avoid or restrain, yeah, from, in particular, from having, you know, sexual activity in a way, yeah. So that helps to control population growth. Okay. So he has both. He looked at the issue of population growth in both ways, and then the other thing that he said was, okay, sorry, the word for in Bahasa Malaysia for abstinence is something like a pantang, yeah, the pantang period or something like that, right? So in a way that was practiced in the past anyway, before the advent of planning, family planning, and all that. Yeah, that's the natural way of controlling birth. Yeah, through abstinence. Now, the other issue that he talked about was to get married and procreate. If you can abstain yourself from having you know, relationships, sexual relationship. Yeah, the second best option is to marry, and of course to have babies or procreate. Itu yang dikatakan oleh Saint Augustine. So he's more of a you know, looking from the sociological perspective, of course. Yeah. And then in 1280 AD, Saint Thomas Aquinas also talks about marriage and procreation as well. So jadi he said that celibacy is no better than marriage or procreation. Jadi celibacy ini maksudnya sama dengan Saint Augustine tadi lah. To abstain yourself, ya, abstinence, voluntary sexual abstinence, more or less, yeah, is not better than marriage and procreation. So just it's good if you want to have a relationship, then you get married and procreate ataupun to have babies and family lah, in other words. Okay, so that is a way through fertility from through marriage and to have children, right? So abstinent ataupun celibacy, voluntary celibacy ataupun voluntary abstinence, sorry, or remain unmarried and so on, yeah. Like nowadays there are a lot of couples, particularly in Western countries, where they stay together, they're not married, yeah, and so remain unmarried, yeah. So abstain from all sexual activity and so on, yeah. And that, according to Saint Thomas Aquinas, is no better than being married and procreate, yeah, ataupun kawin dan terus having children. Okay, Khaldun, his an Arab scholars, of course, in 1380. So he looked at population growth will help to, or rather will result in specialization in terms of occupation, yeah, and also help to increase or raise the level of incomes, yeah, for the people in the country. So among other things, because he has written a lot as well, but in terms of demography, he believed that there's nothing wrong with population growth. In fact, according to him, by increasing population will also increases the occupational specialization. Yeah? In other words, people will specialize in certain jobs, certain skills, and all that. Yeah? And that helps to raise the income. Yeah? Being specialized, meaning that you can get better wage, better pay, right? And that will help to improve the socio-economic level of the family, yeah. So better standard of living eventually. Itu menurut Khaldun. And then, of course, then came the period of mercantilism, where people start to buy and sell, yeah. So according to mercantilism, in a period of about 300 years, so increasing national wealth is important. Yeah, remember they were talking about national wealth. And that's coincide with the colonialism, yeah, masa koloni dulu. Increasing national wealth depends on the population, a growing population that can stimulate trade, yeah, that can stimulate trade. Jadi so the look at growing population is sebagai satu yang bagus, ya, which is good because then people can buy, yeah, products and all that. Okay, if the number of people is small, of course, then the opportunity untuk to gain profit from trade and all that will be less. Right? So on mercantilism, yeah. And then for the next 100 years after that, between 1700 to 1800, also we have the physiocrats looking at the population size. Yeah, also quite related to mercantilism, but in a different context. So instead, population size, according to the physiocrats, depends upon the wealth of the land, right? So in other words, if the wealth of the land is good or has more resources and all that, so that will also help to support the increase in the size of the population. And that, according to them, also is stimulated by the free trade. Jadi, more or less, this is the beginning of the capitalism, yeah, from mercantilism to capitalism or free trade. Okay, so population size depends on the wealth of the land. Ya, kalau negara itu boleh support, in other words, if the country is rich, then it can support the increasing size and population lah. Right. So this is, I got this slide, I borrowed this slide just to share with you the differences between the mercantilists and physiotherapists in terms of their approach, yeah, particularly in terms of trade, for example, yeah. So the mercantilists believe that nation's wealth is determined by the store of precious gold or metal, sorry, mainly gold and silver. So rich country, we have more gold, more silver in storage. Yeah? Sedangkan physiocrats look at nation's wealth. The nation's real wealth, sorry, is derived from land and natural resources, right? Land and natural resources. So, so free trade, according to physiocrats, should be encouraged among nations through the absence of excessive laws and taxes. Sedangkan dalam mercantilism, the importation of foreign goods, yeah, this is what they were doing anyway. So the import foreign goods should be limited through restrictions or high tariff. Jadi perlu ada tariff restrictions, ya, high tariff sebagai satu cara untuk control, ya, the import of foreign goods. And mercantilists look at the government roles in terms of controlling the population patterns by detecting where people can live, ya, mana orang boleh tinggal, hidup, and where they may work, ya, so where they live, where they work, in order to ensure productivity. Ya, itu pandangan daripada mercantilism, ya. But physiocrats, on the other hand, they look at government role to allow people, yeah. So in other words, a minimal control, where government should allow people to make their own choices, not unlike the mercantilist, where the government will detect where people should live and what people should do for a living. Yeah. So according to physiocrats, free labor is more productive compared to a forced labor, yeah, or controlled labor. Yeah, quite a difference between the two group. Yeah. Okay, now Malthus time. So the one we have seen earlier, yeah, those which we consider as the pre-Malthus ataupun sebelum Malthus. Yeah. Now Malthus, Thomas Malthus, his real name, is an economist, or he was an economist, as well as sociologist, and also they during those time. Things were quite different in 1798 compared to previously. Jadi this time, this was the sudden growth in the population. Yeah, so Malthus was worried. Yeah, he was worried about whether or not countries can support in terms of food supply, to meet the needs of the growing population. Jadi teori Malthus ini mengatakan bahwa population is growing exponentially, exponentially. Contohnya daripada 2 ke 4, 4 ke 8 dan sebagainya, seperti yang kita lihat pada remember chessboard last week, question chessboard. Okay, so that's how population grow. So population grows exponentially, but food supply through agriculture grows arithmetically. In other words, it's growing, but growing arithmetically. In other words, from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on and so forth. It doesn't match the rate of growth of the population. So as a result of that, poverty is likely to happen unless the population practice some kind of moral restraint. So in other words, in the absence of moral restraint, in terms of having babies and so on, to have more children. So that's the kind of thing that he was talking about. So poverty is the likely result, of the growing population. Jadi you must remember during that time, even though agriculture was already there, but the technology in agriculture system was still quite low, unlike today lah. Jadi the growth in the agriculture doesn't seem to be matching the high rate of population growth. Okay, we'll talk more about Malthus later on. And then the Neo-Malthusian, this is after Malthus, the 1800, where again, this is also a result of Malthus actually. From Malthus' point of view, yang mengatakan bahawa dulu there need to be some kind of control. So the Neo-Malthusian look at birth control measures as the most appropriate checks to population growth, untuk control population growth in the population melalui birth control. All right. So itu Neo-Malthusian, and then came Marxian, where Marxian ataupun Karl Marx, he came up with his idea in 1844, where he looked at each society has its own law of population that determines the consequences of population growth. So setiap society ataupun even negara akan mempunyai satu undang-undang, a law of its own that determines the consequences of population growth. Okay, jadi kalau Malthus tadi melihat poverty as the natural, more or less the result of the population growth, Karl Marx mengatakan poverty is not the natural result of population growth. It's the distribution of the resources rather that determine the poverty. So whether or not there was poverty or not. Okay, so some a little bit more, and then we go to more details later on. So, and then in 1945, if you look at that, there's a big gap, actually, between the previous theories and the next one. So the next theory is the demographic transition theory. Kadang-kadang dikenali sebagai DMT ataupun DT. Refers to the process where a country moved from high birth, high death rates to low birth and low birth and as well as low death rates, and that we have seen last week. So I just skip that for a moment, and then later on we'll revisit that as well towards later part of the class today. Okay, then 1962. There was a study, or studies rather, we suggest that there is a need to reformulate the demographic transition theory. Jadi yang asalnya was formulated in 1945, but there was some demographers believe that the demographic transition theory need to be looked at and also reformulated. So mana ada perubahan kepada teori tersebut. So by 1963, the demographic response made by individuals to population pressures or pressure of population is determined by the means available to them to respond, ya. Ataupun the way people respond to population increase or pressure tadi is determined by the means available to them, ya. Ada orang mempunyai kemampuan, ada yang tidak. Contohnya lah, some countries have the means to provide family planning and so on and so forth, ya. And other poor countries do not. And also the causes and consequences of population change are intertwined. So in other words, kadang-kadang the causes of population growth or change may also later on becomes the causes atau consequence. So they're quite of intertwined between the causes and consequences of population change. Okay. All right. Right. Another one is the later on 1968 is the Estelin relative cohort size hypothesis. Yang ini more or less based on some studies done, yeah. So in short, in summary, what they have found out is that larger young cohorts, yeah, if there are a lot of young cohorts, a young population, in other words, that will put pressure on young men's relative wages, yeah. Pressure on young men's relative wages, forcing them to make a trade-off between family size and overall well-being. Yeah, in other words, so his wages of his salary or what he earns will force them to make a decision whether to have a big family or to have a better life for the family. In other words, yeah. So trade-off between family size and the overall well-being of him and his family. Yeah, so that is, we'll look at that in more details as well. Yeah, the Estelin relative cohort size hypothesis. Then from 1971 to present, yeah, there was decomposition of the demographic transition. In other words, the demographic transition theory are broken down into some specific transitions. For example, looking at mortality transitions, fertility transition, age transitions, migration, urbanization, and so on and so forth, even family and household. Jadi terdapat maksudnya terdapat transitions, perubahan, demographic transition, not only generally but also it was seen more specifically, more details, yeah, looking at each component of the demographic process. So that's more or less a summary of all the various perspectives and theories with regard to theory of demographic theories or theory, population theory. Okay, so all right. So now I'm going to look into more details. More details on on the some of these theories that I've seen earlier on. Now, the prelude to Malthus, before Malthus, just before Malthus, but after the earlier theories as well, is the one that was by Nicolas de Condorcet. I think that's the way to pronounce it. Nicolas de Condorcet. Sounds like French to me. In 1795, he optimized that unlimited innovation will create wealth. So he already foresee the role of innovation technology that can create wealth, right? So according to him, each successive generation, generasi seterusnya will have larger possessions, mempunyai kekayaan yang lebih banyak. So that meaning progress as a result or a product of industry. So he saw the role of industries to promote greater wealth. Right? So more wealth, according to him, will lead to population increase. Okay. So maksudnya kalau lebih kaya maka lebih more people. So what he also means that family will get bigger, more children because now family can support, with better income and so on. However, if population exceeds the ideal limit, if the population exceeds ideal limit, according to Condorcet, birth control need to be applied. Need to be applied to promote general welfare. So there is a need to, although what we were saying is that industry, technology, and so on promotes greater wealth and therefore can support more people, increase in population. But at the same time, he was also concerned about if the population exceed the ideal limit, certain size, ideal size, so birth control need to be applied. Itu yang dikatakan oleh Condorcet. Jadi so if you look at the pendapat Condorcet tadi, dia he believe technology tadi, industri tadi boleh membantu untuk meningkatkan pendapatan, untuk meningkatkan standard of living, but at the same time I can help promote bigger families and more population. But he believe also that there should be an optimum size in terms of population size. So beyond that, you need to control the population size dengan menggunakan birth control tadi. Right. Now another person before Malthus is by the name of William Godwin. William Godwin, who believed that scientific progress, seperti juga Condorcet tadi, right? Godwin, I believe, is British ataupun orang Britain, believe that scientific progress will enable food supply to grow. Okay, so kata dia, no problem of overpopulation. In other words, the supply of food will be enough to meet the growth in the population. Okay, and then at the same time, he also believed in some kind of control. In other words, number of birth, procreation ataupun babies like that will be controlled as people limit sexual expression. Itu kata dia. So the problem of the poor. Now again, let's look at this, the third point. How does this happen? Progression will be controlled as people limit sexual expression. Maknanya I think because people are, you know, we don't know. I just believe, I just assume during that time, the Industrial Revolution and so on, people are going to work and so on, yeah, working people, and so they have probably um, less time, yeah, for family and so on, yeah. So that will result in less or limited sexual, relationship or expression. Yeah. And then the problem of the poor, starvation, according to Goodwin, is caused by inequality of the social institution. Yeah. So it's not because of the lack of food production, but overall food production, but rather by the distribution itself. Yeah, inequality of social institution. That is the greed and the accumulation of property. In other words, some people have more, some people have less, and some even don't have, yeah, access to that. So that is the real problem. Ya. Jadi ada yang mendapat peluang itu lebih banyak, mendapat kekayaan, dan yang lainnya mungkin kurang ataupun tiada langsung. Right? So that is the issue of distribution. Yeah. Right. Okay, so those are the pre-Malthus, pre-Malthusian. Now is we talk about the Malthusian theory ataupun Malthus theory of population. He actually wrote an essay in which he talks about his belief about the population growth, in other words, his theory, in 1798, right? And Malthus argued that people have a natural urge to reproduce. Right? The natural urge to reproduce ataupun to have children lah maksudnya. And the increase in food supply cannot keep up with the population growth. Itu yang kita lihat awal tadi lah. Right? So the growth in the food supply cannot meet the increasing growth in the population. Yang seperti population growth tadi exponential, dan food growth tadi is arithmetic. Okay, so the major consequences according to Malthus is poverty, yeah, as a result of the population growth tadi exceeding food supply. So within that, poverty is the stimulus for action that can leave people out of misery. In other words, poverty ataupun dalam keadaan poverty itu merupakan satu stimulus, ya, untuk mengambil tindakan that will leave people out of misery, out of poverty situation tadi lah. Okay, so food production could not keep up with the population growth. Ya, itu yang penting lah. Jadi the conclusion that he made was that poverty was an inevitable result of population growth. Jadi apa namanya, dia percaya. Tadi Karl Marx tadi kita lihat awal tadi, Karl Marx doesn't believe that is so. Yeah, Karl Marx is more looking at the equitable distribution, yeah, of goods, food, and so on. Yeah, but Malthus, again, he was based on his observation, mainly in Britain during that time, right? So poverty was a result of the population growth tadi. So population growth causes poverty, according to him. Okay? And he believed that moral restraint was the only acceptable preventive check. Right? The only acceptable preventive check to control births. Yeah, moral restraint. Okay. This is just to show you the relationship between the food supply and the population size lah. Jadi, for example, in the early years, we have the agriculture revolution, all that supplying food, enough to meet the needs of the population. This line, solid line here, represent the population growth. So during this period, there was no problem, enough food and so on. But after that point here, this is where they depart, where the population suddenly grow faster than the rate of food production. So this is the problem, according to Malthus. His fear was this region where there will be not enough food. Okay, going back to Panama. Malthus belief, berkenaan dengan how to control both, dia kata moral restraint. Okay, is one way to control that. Alright, so okay, this is just explanation lah. Jadi contohnya di sini, if we start with 100 acres, enough to support 100 people, and add 100 acres per decade, setiap 10 tahun maksudnya, arithmetically, while the population increases 3% per year, which is growing geometrically, there will be a few decades of food surplus. This is the period of food surplus, and before growth overtakes the increased cultivation and producing food deficit. Okay, so that was based on the essay that he wrote in 1798 regarding food and population growth. So starvation, according to Malthus, may not directly cause mortality. So apa nama ni, kurangnya makanan, tak cukup makanan may not directly cause mortality ataupun kematian. Instead, according to him, moral and physical nature will kill human being through positive checks. So mungkin ada konflik dan sebagainya yang berlaku, yang menyebabkan kematian. So it's not just the starvation itself. So to avoid those consequences, he suggests that men and women should marry and procreate only when a person can afford it. So particularly his advice to men, you only consider marriage or to get married and having children or babies only when you can afford it. Kalau tak mampu, tak payah nak kahwin. Itu dia kata lah. Okay, so he rejects the notion of helping out the poor. By doing so, according to him, the poor will not learn. Jadi, so he believed that it's not a good thing, to help out the poor, because by doing so, they will not learn. Itu that's what perkataannya ataupun the term that he used, tak akan belajar lah, tak akan tahu macam mana untuk mengatasi masalah. So it doesn't quite like the idea that subsidy, for example, he doesn't like that kind of idea. So come the poor law which they have in Britain was not encouraged. Jadi the law for the poor lah, that will have the poor was not encouraged from the Malthusian perspective. So the concept of prudential resistance was introduced in his 5th edition of second essay. So he has another essay in which he talks more about his original theory. So prudential resistance, prudential meaning berjimat cermat, So delay of marriage, or to have babies, or to procreate until one can afford it without necessarily refraining premarital sexual intercourse at the meantime. Jadi dia, it's okay, you can delay marriage, until you can afford it. Itu yang dia kata lah. Alright. Alright, this one here is actually more or less a structured way to look at his theory of the Malthus theory of population. Okay, if you look from here, you have the population increase, yeah, geometrically, yeah, geometrical progressions 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 seperti Persian chessboard, yeah, we seen last week, yeah. And then on this side you have the food supply increase arithmetically, or arithmetical progression from 1 to 2, 2 to 3 to 4, and so on and so forth. Yeah? All right. So that results, according to him, that results in imbalance between the population and the food supply, and there is a need to have some kind of efforts or strategies to correct the imbalance, correction of imbalance. So one of the corrections to the imbalance untuk mengatasi masalah tersebut is to have preventive checks. Ya, preventive check ini termasuklah marriage when you can afford it, and also to have moral restraint. Ya, termasuk the idea of having abstinence, for example. Yeah. And then on this side is the positive or natural checks. So over here, for example, later on, yeah, the use of family planning and so on, yeah, control. And on this side, this is something that is more or less unplanned for, yeah, what he called the positive or natural checks. For example, if there are too many people, too little food supply, famine will occur, epidemics can occur, people fight against one another for limited resources, war, conflict, and so on. Yeah, so that will happen. Secara natural things that happen. Yeah, positive check we call it. Okay, so of course, between these two, between the positive and the preventive check, of course, the preventive check is the best choice lah. We don't want this to happen. Yeah, we don't want this to happen. So one way to control that is to make sure that we have control growth in the population. Yeah, alright. So itu yang dikatakan oleh Malthusian ataupun Malthus berkenaan dengan theory of population growth. Sorry. Okay. Next is the neo-Malthusian. Although we have covered or more or less mentioned it briefly earlier on, this is a more slightly detailed notes on that. Yeah. Okay. So the neo-Malthusians, they favor contraception. In other words, favor having family planning, contraceptives, yeah, rather than relying on moral restraint. Yeah. Moral restraint itu maksudnya menahan diri sendiri daripada melakukan sesuatu, particularly with regard to sexual activity lah. Right, so the neo-Malthusian prefer to have family planning ataupun contraceptive lah use. Right, so the debate then helped to spread the knowledge of birth control in America as well as in England in the 19th century. Right, so that's the spread of the ideas, knowledge of birth control. So one of the important event was the publication of birth control handbook, by Charles Bradlaugh and also Annie Besant. So that's more or less allow people or to spread the knowledge about birth control or control of birth, in that country, and also later on throughout the world. Right, so itu the neo-Malthusian. So jadi that is kind of related. If you see earlier on, kind of related to this one here, right? But it's not not on moral restraint, but rather the use of contraceptives. Okay, right. Move on. The Marxian perspective, ataupun daripada Karl Marx lah ya. If you still remember, Paramani, are you taking this semester kah Sociology of Development? Bukan?
Yes.
Ya, betul.
Yes.
Yeah. Who's teaching you? Dr. Regina, right?
Social development, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, she's teaching your group. I have been asked to teach another group, social work group. That's how I know it's about Karl Marx and his theory, economic theory, and all that. Well, anyway, Karl Marx is of course German by origin. Okay, so he was born in Germany, got married, of course, to his wife in Germany. But one thing about him, he's a very smart person, of course. He has a degree in various disciplines, actually. Surprisingly, economic was not one of the things that he learned in school or in college, but he became famous for his economic theory, later on. So he was born in Germany, raised in Germany, and he earned his PhD at the age of 24. Umur 24 tahun dia dah dapat PhD, doctorate. So he tried to work in Germany, not quite successful. He had, because of his radical ideas. Then he worked in also another country, some other countries like Belgium, and so on. So finally, he was more or less forced to move out from Germany because people in that country didn't quite like his radical ideas. So he migrated to London or to England, right? So that's where he started writing his book. For example, the book on communism, right? And so on, his famous theories berkenaan dengan labor theory, surplus theory, dan sebagainya. Right? He talks about the two groups of classes of people in England during that time, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Bourgeoisie ini merupakan middle class ataupun the capitalist, and the proletariat that he was looking at is the working class people. So anyway, nanti saya bagi lecture pula dalam bidang sociology development, yeah. So I was just teaching that. I was just having that particular topic, last Tuesday with my student of social work. Okay, anyway, let's go back to Marxian perspective. Yeah, so in 1864, by the way, he moved to England in 1840 something. Yeah, so by 1864, he also a sociologist, by the way, so he has sociology, philosophy, and so on. So he has written an article more or less to respond to Thomas Malthus' notion of depleting resources, especially food supply. Okay, so the concept of avoiding the consequences was more or less adopted in Germany and Austria, and the impact was kind of mixed in a way, not quite as expected. So according to him, this is what he believed lah. Setiap society or a society at each point in history will have their own or its own law of population that determines the population growth. So every country, because every country or every situation is unique, is different. And so you cannot have one law that governs every other parts of the world, for example. That's what he believed in, right? So for capitalism, remember he was also concerned about capitalism. One of his critic is because of capitalism, therefore the existence, the continued existence of the two classes of people, the working class getting poorer and poorer, living in very poor conditions, their salary or the gaji kecil and remain low, because they were being used by the capitalists to earn profit and so on. So he doesn't like capitalism, right? So for him, for capitalism, the consequences are overpopulation and poverty. In other words, a lot of people, and at the same time, there are the other group of people who are living in poverty, who doesn't have the resources. Yeah. So he actually promotes socialism, ataupun eventually talking about communism lah. So for socialism, this is where population growth is readily absorbed by the economy with no side effects. Jadi tak ada kesan sebab whatever resources there is in the country will be distributed to the people. So nobody should be suffering from very bad side effects, yeah, of the growth in the population. Itu bezanya dengan pendapat Malthus, ya. Right. So poverty, according to the Marxian perspective, as a result of poorly organized society, especially capitalism, right? So in a well-ordered society, where more people means more wealth, ya. Jadi dalam keadaan yang baik, well-ordered society, more people meaning more wealth. So ini mungkin ada remember the mercantilism that we seen earlier on, yeah, believe that more people is good for the country as well, right? So more people means more wealth, so it will be availability of workforce, yeah, to work in industry and so on and so forth, yeah, and to produce goods. Okay, tetapi dalam capitalism, as he said, this is where the poverty will result, yeah, because of the poorly organized society. So in a well-ordered society, workers' wages were cut. In capitalist society, workers' wages were cut to pocket more profit by the owners or the capitalists. Right. So this is what he perceived as something that is not right. Yeah. The workers who were lowly paid, ya, gajinya kecil, keadaan tempat kerja yang kurang baik, ya, and they have to work to make sure that there are more profit for the owners or the capitalists. So the capitalists will be able to buy machineries, and these machineries and technologies will eventually replace human labor, and that will lead to unemployment and poverty, right? Leading to unemployment and poverty. So there is truth to this, where industries are now using automated machineries and so on to replace human labor. So that will decrease the need to have labor, so leading to unemployment. So if you're unemployed, you're not earning, you are likely to be living in poverty, of course. Yeah. Alright. Alright, so itu yang dikatakan oleh Karl Marx, ya, ataupun the Marxian perspective. Okay, can we take a break now for maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll continue after that, boleh ya?
Boleh.
Yes, sir.
So kita berhenti sekejap, buat kopi ke apa ke, teh ke, untuk minum-minum. Alright. Oke, kita sambung balik ya kuliah kita. Alright. Hello. Can we continue?
Hello.
Kita sambung ya. Alright.
Boleh, sir.
Okay. Alright. A British sociologist. Kalau tadi Karl Marx from Germany originally, but of course he spent most of his later life, in England. Yeah, John Stuart Mill, British sociologist, and he was also a former member of Parliament, by the way. Yeah, member of Parliament for in England, yeah, in Britain, right? So he was policymaker as well as a sociologist. Okay, so his basic thesis was that the standard of living is a major determinant of fertility levels. Major determinants of fertility levels. In other words, whether or not you are you have a better standard of living or you have a lower standard of living, that determine the level of fertility. Fertility levels ini maksudnya refers to the number of birth, yeah, per women actually, yeah. Right. All right. So the ideal state, according to John Stuart Mill, is that all members of society are economically comfortable. Ya, itu ideal state, keadaan yang ideal, where everybody lives comfortably. Tapi in reality, of course, things are different lah, right? So women will be able to access education. Women were given rights and all that. So thus they can choose to have less children. And this is what was happening later on. That not only they were given opportunities in education and the rights and so on, but they were also involved in labor, and that's participation in labor. So because that have more or less influenced their decision to have less children. Okay, some don't even because of the career, for example. Yeah, they focus more on the career rather than family. So they're not some of these Western women, they don't even plan to get married at all. Yeah, so that will definitely reduce their fertility levels. Yeah, so his idea was, again, this is about how to reduce population growth. According to Stuart Mill, you have to educate the public to have common sense. Yeah, what is good, what is bad. Yeah, for him or his family or her family. So in the case of overpopulation, importing food or exporting out people are some of the strategies. Yeah, in other words, if a place is overpopulated, so one of the things they can do is to import food, yeah, from outside, from other places, to meet the needs of the population. The other option is, of course, according to Stuart Mill, is for people to move out, migrate out, yeah. Hopefully voluntarily, tapi ada juga keadaan di mana ada where it happened in the world, in some part of the world, where people are forced to move out, yeah, or to export people out of the overpopulated area, yeah, to another areas. So things like a transmigration, for example, is an example where people were trying to move people out from certain highly overpopulated area to move to another sparsely populated area. Ya, transmigration. Oke, so itu secara ringkas berkenaan dengan Stuart Mill's ideas on demography or population growth. Yeah? So he thinks that one of the major impact is on women who are given rights, equal rights, opportunities for education, job, yeah, employment, and so on. That has will influence the number of children that they have, right? Okay. Now another person, again, this is from France, Arsène Dumont, bukan Arsène Wenger. Arsène Wenger itu coach, former coach of Arsenal football team or football club. Right, so Arsène Dumont was a late 19th century French demographer who felt he discovered a new principle, a new principle of population called social capillarity. Social capillarity. In other words, he was referring to the desire, kemahuan, kehendak, of people to rise on the social scale. Yeah, so everybody wants to rise the social scale. Yeah, to increase their individuality as well as their personal wealth. Jadi that's the thing that he's talked about. Yeah, everybody wants that. Yeah, wants to be better in society. Yeah, to have their freedom, their individuality, as well as their personal wealth. Yeah, kekayaan dan sebagainya. So he believes that in order to climb or to ascend the social hierarchy, it requires sacrifice. Yeah. So if you want something, you have to sacrifice something else. Itu maksudnya. That's what he believed. So apa yang perlu di-sacrifice di sini? So for example, for larger family, it will be more difficult to mobilize upward or to ascend or to climb the social hierarchy, to move upwards the social scale, because they have, in the first place, they have a large number of people to take care of, and then that will make it difficult, for them to climb the social scale tadi lah, untuk meningkat dalam in society, upward mobility. So he encouraged, Arsène Dumont believed that families should be smaller in order for them to climb or to ascend the social hierarchy in society. All right, so smaller family is encouraged. Okay, jadi it's good. According to him, that's good. It's good to have a smaller family. In order for you to rise in social scale, social hierarchy, in order to increase your individuality, more freedom for yourself, and also more wealth. If you have a smaller family. All right. Emile Durkheim, you know this person very well already by now. You should, right? Emile Durkheim, a famous sociologist. His focus is also on impact, on the impact of population growth, rather than trying to explain how or why population grow. He is more focused on the impact ataupun kesan, pertumbuhan populasi. So this is based on the entire social theory on the consequences of population growth. Yeah? Right. So according to Amal Durkheim, population growth will lead to greater social specialization. Yeah, leading to greater societal specialization. Right. So the struggle for existence is more acute, more what I call more important, if you will. Yeah. When there are more people. In other words, if there are a lot of people, then the struggle will be even more difficult. In other words, yeah, if there are a lot of people compared to if there are less people, then struggle for existence will be less. So to improve the advantage in the struggle, setiap orang lah setiap yang manusia ataupun in the country is trying to struggle to make a better life, yeah, for job and so on and so forth, yeah. So one way to improve that advantage in the struggle is to have specialization, yeah. So people specialize so that they have a better opportunity to, to gain employment, to have better wages and so on and so forth. Okay, so so that is in short, in very brief, his contribution. As we have seen earlier on, ada juga orang yang awal daripada ini telah talking about specialization, yeah, as population growth. So he was building on that earlier theory as well, yeah. Okay, so he believed that specialization or population growth will lead to specialization, and that will help to improve the advantage in terms of competition, yeah, competition for jobs, for the other things, yeah, in life, yeah. Okay, and then we have the of course the demographic transition theory by American demographer by the name of Warren Thompson, yeah, in 1929. He developed the theory based on the data that he and his group collected between 1908 and 1927. So it is what I call a longitudinal study looking at the growth and the population and what happened, yeah, during those years, including the death rate, the fertility rate, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Jadi berdasarkan kepada data tersebut, he came out with a theory. Yeah. So the theory emphasizes the importance of economic as well as the social development. Jadi economic development and social development influence rather two very important elements, demographic processes rather. One is the fertility and the other is mortality, right? Okay, so according to this theory, again, we are repeating what we have seen last week, yaitu, so the first thing to decline between fertility and mortality adalah is mortality. That's the easiest. Why? Because of the availability of health services, better sanitary conditions and all that, technology, not so much about technology, but availability of medical facilities, the Industrial Revolution in particular, yeah, helps that a lot. Jadi what happened was that helps to decline the mortality rate, yeah, first, while the fertility remains high in the beginning, right? That's the phase 1 of the demographic transition model. Right, so decline in mortality and then later on decline in the fertility. Okay, so this is based on the data and the experience of the developed nations, and also this theory was also derived from the modernization theory as well. So I will not go into too much detail, and just quickly on the three main stages. Yeah, the original demographic transition divided into three stages. The first is the stage one, which is the birth rate. The birth and death rates are high, so growth rates even in the stage one were very low. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mentioned about the transition that actually happened stage two. So stage one is the very traditional. Stage two is where the transition took place. Transition from high to low birth rates and death rate. Yeah. So the growth in terms of the population was growth potential is realized as death rate drops. Yeah. Jadi you find that the growth in the population increase. Disebabkan oleh penurunan kadar kematian, ya, before the birth rate drop. Jadi because the birth rate still remain high, so the overall contribution in stage 2 is a greater or growth in the population, yeah. So rapid population growth. Stage 3 is where the death rates are as low as they are likely to go. In other words, the lowest that death rate can go down to, because eventually human being will die lah, sebabkan oleh keadaan dah tua dan sebagainya. So death in early age, or particularly infants death itu telah turun, but you cannot go down beyond certain level, yeah, because eventually everybody, yeah, will die anyway. So death rates are as low as they are likely to go, while fertility may continue to decline to the point that population might decline. Jadi there is a possibility that one day, in fact, in one or two countries in the world, we have seen that already, where the fertility rate has declined beyond the point where where there is negative growth in the population. Okay. Ini again, this is the one you have seen this already. Tak payah saya nak repeat lah, right? This is the death rate yang mula-mula turun cepat, fertility rate turun tapi lambat sikit, ya. Okay. Alright, so this one I've shown you also last week, right? Some of the reasons, yeah. For related to each of the stages of the demographic transition model, DTM, or demographic transition model, right? Okay, so I'll just skip this one, yeah. But that doesn't mean it is not important, eh? So just look at this, try to study this. This is the latest model, as I said, including the the original 3 stages. Now we have the 4 stages, and now we have the 5 stages. Yeah. All right. So let me, without going into detail on the demographic transition theory, let me go next to the modernization theory. So modernization theory is talking about the impact of modernization, actually, yeah, on population growth. Jadi the macro level theory that sees this is a more or less a macro level theory lah, that look at human actors as being shaped by the changing social institutions, right? Changing social institutions. So individuals did not purposely lower their risk of death to cause a modern decline in mortality. So bukan did not purposely, tak sengaja, ya, trying to lower the risk of death, yeah, the risk of death. It just happened because of modernization, in other words. Okay, so it increased. So, for example, the increase in income, helps to have a better standard of living. You can afford, for example, with increase in income, people can afford to go to private clinics, to afford medication, to have better houses, better food, quality food, and so on and so forth. So that is the as a result of increase in income. Right? So that actually eventually more or less contribute to the decrease in the decline in the death rate. Yeah? And also improve public health infrastructure. You have hospital, you have clinics, you have technology sekarang ini, better medications and so on. Yeah. While at the same time the apa namanya, increase ataupun improve in income or socio-economic well-being menyebabkan people can afford to as I said just now to get better health services. Okay, so all these are brought about by change ataupun to the process of modernization tadi. Okay, so death rates lowers as standard of living improve. Birth rate as well will always decline a few decades later. Kita lihat daripada demographic transition model tadi. So it's following death rate turun, birth rate juga akan turun kemudiannya. So it's easier actually to reduce death rate as people are more concerned about longevity ataupun living longer life. So so take care of people and population will take care of itself. So that's the important thing. So if people can take care of themselves, or if the government can take care of the people in terms of improve the standard of living and so on, the population will also be able to take care of itself. Maksudnya dari segi pengawalan pertumbuhan populasi. Yeah. Right. So according to this modernization theory, development is the best contraceptive. Yeah, development is the best. In other words, it contributes to the decline in mortality, and also importantly, it also helps to reduce fertility. Yeah, reduce fertility. How does it do that? Yeah. Well, for example, as mentioned earlier on, that given more opportunities for women, rights and all that, participation in labor or the workplace, better education and all that, that helps family, in particular women, the awareness of health, the awareness of having less children, and so it is through the process of development, right? So one of the earliest exponents of the modernization theory was Karl Marx. Yeah, Karl Marx. All right. Okay, so development itself is good for population growth. In other words, development will take care of the problems of overpopulation. In other words. Okay, the other one that we have mentioned earlier on is the Esterlin relative cohort hypothesis that we saw in the table earlier on. Yeah? So, right. So Esterlin relative cohort size hypothesis. This was in 1978. Yeah. So according to this theory or hypothesis, birth rate does not necessarily respond to changes in economic condition. Jadi dia berlainan daripada modernization theory. Ya. Kalau ikut modernization theory tadi, the economic condition influence the fertility rates, not only fertility but also death rates. So this is theory of relative income, relative income. So the relative income determines the standard of living, and also your experience in late childhood, whether you is going to make it a success or not. So the standard of living you experience in late childhood is the base from which you try to evaluate your chances as an adult. So your experience during that time help you to make some kind of decision or evaluation on your chances as an adult. So you can improve your income as an adult compared to your childhood level. So if you think you can, in other words, so if you think through your evaluation you can improve your income as an adult compared to your childhood level, you are more likely to marry early and have several children. Itu yang dikatakan oleh pendapat yang dikemukakan oleh Esterlin study ini. Right, so you sebagai contoh lah, kalau kamu fikir that you will be doing better the next year or so, in terms of income, you probably likely to get married earlier and have children after that. Okay, so itu yang dikaitkan dengan Esterlin. Dah ada cerita sikit tadi awal tadi. So it's in other words, your success, as an adult, your perceive or your likelihood to be successful as in your adult life will influence whether you are going to get married early or not, and to have children. Itu dimaksudkan dengan Esterlin cohort size study, hypothesis study. The more likely you are going to be successful, in other words, the more likely you are going to get married early and have several children. Itu hypothesis. All right. Okay, so last but not least is the demographic transition. Remember the general demographic or the original demographic transition theory talks about the transitions that we mentioned earlier on, from high birth rate, high death rates to lower birth rates and low death rates. Tetapi what happened later on was the concern ataupun looking at the transition from a more specific perspective, with regard to the demographic variables tadi, for example, death, birth, and so on. Right. So breaking demographic transition into several transitions, not just one general. For example, first is looking at transition in terms of mortality. So this is the shift from death at younger ages to due to diseases, or to death at older ages due to degenerative diseases. Degenerative diseases adalah sebabkan tua lah, old age. Compared to in the earlier years, in the old days, there were kematian banyak berlaku at the younger ages, especially infant death, and all that. Tapi sekarang ni the transition is towards death ataupun kematian di peringkat umur yang tua. Itu yang dimaksudkan, So there is a mortality transition. Kalau dulu pada umur yang muda generally sekarang ini adalah berubah kepada pada umur tua. Okey. Begitu juga dengan fertility, ya, fertility transition, yaitu perubahan from natural and high to a control or low fertility. Ya, kalau dulunya, remember in the first and even the second stage or stages in the demographic transition model, the rate of birth ataupun fertility adalah tinggi, and then later on it shifted to low and also a control fertility later on. Yeah, so there is the shifting ataupun transition in terms of fertility. All right. The other one is, of course, is also the other transition. The other set transition adalah age transition. So in this age transition, the social and economic reactions as societies adjust to constantly changing age distribution. Jadi perubahan taburan populasi. Right? Kalau dulunya, if you look at the the shape of the pyramid, yeah, broad base, and then narrow towards the top. That's the kind of distribution, yeah, in terms of age distribution. Tapi we now see that the transitions are occurring where you have the base becomes smaller, and then the top, ya, ataupun peringkat atas umur tu semakin meningkat, and that is a result of increasing life expectancy dan sebagainya. So that is the age transition that we're looking at. Yeah? How social and economic reactions as societies adjust to constantly changing age distribution. Right, so that will have an impact economically and also socially, yeah, on societies. The fourth one is the actually the third element, yeah, important demographic process adalah migration lah. So migration juga mengalami transition. Yeah, the migration transition here is where there is a growth in the number of young people in the rural areas, will lead to an oversupply of young people looking for jobs. Right, so which encourages people to leave the rural areas in search of economic opportunities, mainly in the urban areas or even in another country. Jadi, so the migration of young people from the rural areas, yeah, looking for jobs to the urban areas. Yeah, growing number of young people in the rural areas, leading to an oversupply of people looking for jobs. There's not enough job opportunities as a result of the growing number of young people. So some of them will leave, or that condition encourages people to leave the rural areas to look for better economic opportunities outside of the areas atau rural areas tadi. So that is the transition, migration transition also. Otherwise, this is known as the, remember we talked about the theory rural-urban migration. So that is part of it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that is the, another one also quite related adalah the urban transition. Yeah. Urban transition. First of all, it started with the migration of people from rural to urban areas, and that develops into kind of urban evolution. Urban evolution as most humans are born in, live in, and die in cities. Kalau dulunya the contribution adalah migration of people from rural to urban. But now it's the people who are already in the urban areas, born in the urban areas, living in the urban areas, and also dying or die in the cities as well. Okay, so itu merupakan satu lagi set transisi ataupun transition, okay, urban transitions. Last but not least is the family and household transition. Perubahan ya dari segi family and also structure of households, in other words, yeah. So that transitions. So this is brought about by some structural changes, perubahan struktur that accompany longer life, yeah, lower fertility, and older age structure. Jadi ini ada kaitan dengan apa yang berlaku pada fertility, pada age transition, and so on. Yeah. So this has brought about changes, yeah, structural changes to the household and so family as a result of longer life. So you will see, for example, old age living alone, yeah, example of families, yeah, and also lower fertility, meaning less of young family members, for example, yeah, and urban instead of rural residents. So there are now more. Kalau dulunya the old days, you have more people living in the rural areas, but now you have more people who are residing or living in the urban areas. Okay, so that kind of household transition. So, okay, so you can look at it this way and how it impact on society lah, actually, yeah. So all of this that we have seen earlier on, yeah, Asia transition, migration transition, urban transition, fertility transition, mortality transition, that affects the family and household transition. Okay, and that of course will have an impact on society, or society will have an impact on the household, or these factors actually. Yeah, right. So that's the relationship between the sorry, the impact of the demographic transitions and impact on the society. All right. Any question? Yeah. You have now reached the end of the. We finished early today, but nevertheless, it has been a long lecture, 2 hours. Yeah, but we have cut short a few because we have dealt with some of those, particularly on demographic transition last week. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on that. Okay, any question? Let me just click on this. I think this is something where I got my source. Java. Let me check that. Don't know whether it's still there or not. This link. Okay, this is the one. Just to sum up, yeah, untuk just at the end here, just to explain again, sekejap, looking at Thomas Malthus and population growth. Yeah. Let me load this one. Okay, yang ini kita lihat sebentar lah. For 8 minutes. Tak ada suara. Sekejap,
And reason. In the 1700s, we saw that.
Sekejap. Sorry, can you see this screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So just for 8 minutes, yeah, just to again to explore the Malthusian theory. All right. All right. Okay. All right. Itu more or less just to explain more on the Malthusian theory of population growth. And the thing that they mentioned, or he mentioned there, is about Malthusian limit. Yeah. And one example of that is where Bangladesh, for example, where you have just too many people. Yeah, too many people living in one place or in a space that it's almost impossible. Yeah, difficult for one to survive. Yeah, the resources are limited and so on. Jadi itulah. So although there is a general relationship between food supply and population growth, where if the economy, or if the food supply is increasing or better and all that, that will also leading to population growth as well. Yeah, but after a while, the population will after meeting that point tadilah, that point where supply of food meets the growth in population, that's when the population will start to decline. Right. So there is some truth. There is some truth to what Malthus was saying, but his fear. Remember, he was living in the 70s, late 1700s. Where things were not as they are today, right? So he couldn't figure out how technology can improve production of food and so on. So so his fear was that. Number two, also that in terms of the influence of modernization, also has helped to reduce population growth as well. So all this. All these things happened after he was gone, more or less. Yeah. So so there are a lot of criticisms of his perspective, of his theory on population. Okay, let me look at the chats here. These are not questions. These are just attendance. I see. Okay. I'm looking for if there are comments or questions. Yeah. All right. Any questions or comment? Ada? Are you okay with the? I mean, this is just more or less some perspective or some of the theories of population growth, right? So just to expose you to some of this earlier perspective as well as the latest, yeah, on population theory. Oke, kalau tidak ada, saya rasa setakat ini saja kuliah ataupun kelas hari ini. Yeah, then we'll continue with our class next week lah. Right, so besok cuti umum untuk Sarawak dan Sabah. So have a good Friday to those of you who are Christians di Sabah, Sarawak, di Semenanjung pun, ya. Although there is no public holiday for those who are in West Malaysia. It's only for Sabah and Sarawak only. Okay, happy Good Friday to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you,
All right.
bro.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we stop here. Okay.